Welcome to Coast Vue, the show that celebrates the men and women who are making coastal Mississippi such a great place to live, work, and play. In the second half of the show today, we're going to be talking with Todd Trenchard. I think actually Courtney Anderson will be joining him as well. And they represent the Baco McCarty Foundation, have done incredible work just in general, but certainly in this pandemic, they continue to hit on all cylinders. I look forward to getting an update from Todd. In the first section of the show, we're going to have Josh Morgerman, Cyclone, aka Hurricane Man. He has he's been in 53 eyewalls now, and he's the top hurricane chaser in the world. He's living in Bay St. Louis, and so let's go on to Josh now and say good morning. Hey, buddy.
Hey, how's it going, man?
So if people, for regular listeners, they know you already. They've enjoyed the conversations that you and I have had, but if someone's new to the conversation, I want to take a step back for a second and remind people sort of where you came from and what you're doing, but to try to sort of tickle people's fancy a little bit and give them a sense of what's coming. You recently chased Sally over in the Gulf Shores, Orange Beach area. I had the mayor of Orange Beach on last Friday, and I'll have the mayor of Gulf Shores actually on tomorrow. But you got hung up in your car in the eye of the storm. And anyway, we're not going to tell that story yet. We're going to come back to that in just a second. But how you doing this morning, buddy?
Oh, real good. Just watching Tropical Storm Beta coming ashore in Texas. I was almost going to be on the road again for that. I thought I was going to get a rest after Sally. Then I thought I was going to be packing my things and getting back in the car. But as it turns out for me, this one is a stay at home.
It's a stay at home because it didn't become a hurricane. But there was that point yesterday, actually, where this is being taped on Monday, by the way, for Tuesday airing. But anyway, where that eye started to form, and I thought, Josh is going to have to head that way.
Yeah, when these things start to get close to the coast, I start watching the radar. I actually start ignoring everything else. I don't even pay attention to the computer models once it's in radar range. It's all about what is it doing in real time. And I saw all of a sudden, like you said, it looked like it was developing a core, an eye wall. And that's sometimes a sign that this thing is about to explode. And I was like, oh boy, here we go. And I was literally just about to start packing the car. But as it turned out, that thing was just sort of a transient feature. It kind of fell apart in a couple of hours, and looks like this thing, in terms of becoming a hurricane, that it's never going to come together. Doesn't mean it's not dangerous, but not a wind event.
So you rented a house in Bay St. Louis for hurricane season. How has that turned out for you?
It's been awesome. I'm from LA, I'm from a big city on the West Coast. And this kind of change has been like just what the doctor ordered. Obviously, in terms of chasing hurricanes, this has been perfect. If you look at a map of where all the landfalls have been, Hurricane Hannah in Texas, Hurricane Isaias in the Carolinas, Hurricane Laura in Louisiana, Hurricane Sally in Alabama, the Mississippi coast is almost like this perfect midpoint. It's allowed me to do really kind of pretty accessible road trips to each of those landfall points. So it's been amazing as a chase headquarters, but then just all the chasing aside, just living somewhere completely 100% different has been amazing. It's been really nice. I've been really kind of enjoying just the pace of life. I love Bay St. Louis. I feel like it's become a second home to me. I feel I'm kind of like a dog, I get very territorial. I spend some time somewhere and it becomes like my turf. And I feel like Bay St. Louis now is my turf. It feels like it's my town, even when I go to Biloxi, for example, I feel like, nope, this isn't my town. Bay St. Louis is my town.
It gets, coastal Mississippi gets in your blood. I mean, the people here, as you've discovered, are just incredible. Bay St. Louis, having the hurricane history that it has an immense amount of pride that's really deep-seated, and you see that when you're there, don't you?
Oh, absolutely. I was saying, I grew up on Long Island in New York, where we get hurricanes once in a while. And I was this teenage hurricane nerd, reading about all the, the great hurricanes of the past. And I remember, when I was growing up, the big benchmark American hurricane was Camille. And Bay St. Louis and Pass Christian were these two towns. To me, they were just dots on the map. I didn't know anything about them, but those were ground zero for like the greatest American hurricane. And I always wondered, God, what are those places like? They went right through the worst of Camille. And it's so like cool to be living, in a place that's, from a hurricane standpoint, so sort of historically significant. The house I'm in, this is a 90-year-old house. It went right through Camille's eye. And of course, it was in the very worst of Katrina, as you guys know. I mean, the Mississippi coast, and especially around St. Louis Bay, Bay St. Louis past Christian, that was the highest storm surge in American history. Yeah, this place from a hurricane history perspective is super significant.
Well, as you know, I'm a tropical nerd, so yeah. I've been following tropical weather for an awful long time. But along the way, I discovered you. And, Haiyan, I mean, what an experience that was for you in the Philippines. Dorian, Michael, Patricia in Mexico. People can go to YouTube and do a search, iCyclone, and learn more about Josh. He has a hurricane. He has a TV show that was produced by the BBC called Hurricane Man that's been a hit around the world. And, on hiatus because of the pandemic, but you actually hope to crank back up again as soon as the pandemic's over, right?
Yep, that's the plan. The pandemic, I think, threw a big monkey wrench into a lot of people's plans, but we would like to do that. It's too bad we didn't shoot Hurricane Man this year, because just from the U.S. alone, we would have had, an incredible set of episodes. And just for folks who aren't familiar with Hurricane Man, it's a show where a crew follows me around the world, as I hunt down hurricanes or typhoons, as they're called in East Asia, as I hunt them down, and one crew follows me as I'm, trying to get in the eye to collect data. Another crew embeds with a local family to get the experience of just normal people going through it. And a third crew embeds with emergency services to get that perspective of the heroes who are rescuing people. And it kind of interweaves these three plots together. So season 1 was all over the world. Season 2 could have been just in the U.S. alone with the epic hurricane season we've been having. I mean, all of these impacts have just been wow. The U.S. so far, we're just past peak season, and the U.S. has had 4 landfalling hurricanes. Not a record, but a very, very busy year for us.
So before we get to Sally, and we'll start to turn that, excuse me, in that direction in the second half of the show, I'm curious, when you are in the eye of a storm, I suddenly around that time start to see you on major networks. When did that start? And are you literally communicating with them in the eye of the storm, or how does that work? Talk to us about that.
Well, it's always my desire to kind of get the business details out of the way beforehand. I always tell the news producers, hey, I don't want to be negotiating business while I'm hunting down a hurricane. That's like asking like a tennis player to be like negotiating the prize money when they're like literally slugging it out in the 5th set. It's like, and it is like being an athlete. And when I'm chasing, I really do have tunnel vision. But again and again, because of the nature of the news industry, news producers, they don't care about you until they really care about you. It's like you don't exist. And then all of a sudden, when you're in the heart of a major news story, then all of a sudden, like everyone's calling you at once. And that's always when you're in the hurricane. So yeah, I'm often like in my car, with the wind and rain blowing, and I'm talking to some news producer in New York, over money. It's kind of crazy. That started with Super Typhoon Haiyan in 2013. That was a Category 5 typhoon that flattened a city in the Philippines, thousands dead, a horrible tragedy, a major worldwide news story. And actually CBS Evening News really, they knew I was there and they wanted my story, and they basically just kind of hunted me down and got me on CBS. And that was the first time I'd done TV.
Wow, that's so interesting. And since then, just give us a flavor of the networks you've been on.
Gosh, I think I've literally just been on every single one. I've been on CNN, Fox News, NBC, CBS, the Weather Channel. I've done a lot of work with Weather Channel, Sky News. I think I've been on BBC. I mean, just literally like every major news network. I'm not exclusive. I'm on my own when I'm doing a coverage. So it just depends on the storm. For this last one, for Sally, my work was on ABC and CBS.
Well, people ask me, because my closest friends know that you and I have become friends, and Ann and I really enjoy getting to know you better. But they said, how does he do this? And I said, well, he owns a branding and marketing company called Symblaze. He's the co-founder of that company, executive vice president. You have a great partner that's in LA, and you don't miss a lick, do you?
Yep, not a lick. It's like the way it works. The one thing, the pandemic has been obviously a tragedy in so many ways. It's disrupted lives. It's obviously killed a lot of people and everything else. Me, I try to be a glass half full kind of guy, and I try to look at, okay, what's the positive here? The positive is, from this whole pandemic, the one positive is that your physical location no longer matters because everyone now is working remotely. It doesn't matter to my clients whether I'm in LA or planet Mars. I mean, it just doesn't matter. And so that's allowed me to have this big adventure in life to just, for example, live in Mississippi for 6 months. It's been really cool. I've been able to do this kind of thing because physical location no longer matters because we're all interacting and collaborating remotely.
This is Josh Morgerman, iCyclone, a.k.a. Hurricane Man, the top hurricane chaser in the world, been in 53 eye walls, including the most recent one, Sally. And when we come back from the break, we're going to talk about his unique experience with Sally, getting caught in his car in the eye of that storm, and it was a much more significant storm than he expected. We'll be back after this break.
Subscribe for free to the Coast Vue podcast on iTunes, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome back to Coast Vue. We have Josh Morgerman. He's the top hurricane chaser in the world. He went over and experienced Laura. He went over and experienced Sally. He's in currently actually at Hurricane House in Bay St. Louis, where he's living temporarily during the hurricane season. And he wondered about what it was going to be like when he came here and would there be any storms. And now he's beginning to understand what it feels like to live on the Gulf Coast. For anyone who lives on the Gulf Coast, anytime a storm is threatening to either get into the Gulf of Mexico or is in the Gulf of Mexico, it changes your whole mentality. You're seeing that, aren't you, Josh?
Oh, yeah. I mean, listen, I'm a total history nerd. Not only do I chase hurricanes, but I follow the, like the past events and everything else. And intellectually, I knew this, but now I emotionally know it. When you're living on the northern Gulf Coast, you feel like you're living in a shooting gallery. And it's like every time a hurricane or any system enters the Gulf, it's like a gun cocking. And you're like, all right, who's going to get it this time? And living in Mississippi this summer, it's really, it's kind of crazy. We've seen these big intense landfalls to the west and to the east. We've kind of scraped by, but we've been under hurricane warnings a couple of times. It is very interesting now to observe it as a resident here on the ground.
Well, Josh, you and I have talked about this before, so let's get to Sally, because it really does reveal a lot that you and I have talked about. For example, we talked about it's a little scary if you get too many close calls. People may not take the next storm seriously. The fact that when you have a storm that's close to shore, it doesn't have good steering currents, drives the National Hurricane Center insane. I talked about this with the mayor of Orange Beach, Tony Kennan. I'll talk with Robert Kraft, the mayor of Gulf Shores, about it tomorrow. But the National Hurricane Center probably needs to refine some of their approaches, because the people over in Gulf Shores and you discovered this, did not have enough warning to adequately prepare. For example, moving boats. I mean, of all things, here's this incredible oceanside community whose boats, virtually none of them survived this storm. We've got some work to do. But one of the things we were saying about this storm specifically was that if what happened in Gulf Shores had happened here, it would have been a really devastating experience. That is a strong Category 2, maybe Category 3 storm with 29 inches of rain, where Tony had water. He's never had water before, because you have 29 inches of rain that couldn't get out through the storm water runoff system because that was inundated with storm surge. These are all the things we talked about prior to Sally, but you went over there and you experienced that. So talk to us about your experience there.
Yeah, Sally was a tough chase. So for some of the reasons that you alluded to, generally, if you look at the science of hurricane prediction and you look at the hurricane or the computer models and how they perform, generally what you've seen over the last couple of decades is the science has gotten better and better at predicting where hurricanes are going to go, like predicting the track. they're still not doing really great in terms of intensity, sort of being able to predict whether something's going to get stronger or weaker. Now with Laura, we saw that they didn't do a great. They had trouble getting a handle on the intensity. They did not expect it to get that strong, but the Hurricane Center nailed the track with Laura. Like, I mean, days in advance, they had it coming ashore right where it did in the Texas-Louisiana line. Okay, with Sally, it was actually troublesome from both perspectives. They had trouble with the track and they had trouble with the intensity. And that's why it was kind of a big surprise that folks in Gulf Shores, Alabama went from thinking that they're not going to really be getting a storm. It's going to be hitting somewhere to the west in Mississippi, whatever, to getting a pretty intense hurricane just crashing ashore right there. And from a chase perspective, it was tough too. I was readjusting positions constantly. I didn't know where I was going to be for this thing until basically it was coming ashore. It's what I call sliding into home plate. I didn't pick my location until basically the eye wall, the intense inner core, was on shore.
Well, you also told me about this. You have a continuum. If it's going to be a super strong storm, you settle in one place. If it's going to be a weak storm, you feel like you can stay in your car and be a little bit more mobile. This was somewhere in between, if not a little bit more toward the strong area, but you were in your car. So let's talk about that.
Yeah, exactly. So all day long, the day before this thing hit, I was watching it on radar, and I had to be honest. I mean, Sally just looked like scrambled eggs. I mean, it looked like I was not convinced that it was even going to come ashore as a hurricane. I mean, it was hurting. And then at the very last second that night, it just suddenly, that eye wall just spun up. It started to get that kind of circular look, started to look really intense. And literally it just, in the final hours, it got really strong, almost up to category 3. I was chasing it in this kind of very aggressive way, thinking it wasn't going to be a strong storm. And, I better just kind of be in my car to get some cool shots. And I didn't realize how strong the storm was until I was in it. And I was on Beach Boulevard in Gulf Shores, in the core of this very intense hurricane. And I had to basically just pull the car over to the side of the road, put the emergency brake on, and ride it out that way. And it was harrowing.
Well, so you're lucky actually, because I think the area where you were during Ivan, the storm surge might have come over the highway. So how concerned were you about that?
I was concerned. The planning for storm surge and where it's going to be is like number one for me when I'm chasing in the U.S. Gulf Coast, because that is always a concern around here. So I had mapped out my escape routes beforehand, where I was going to go if the water started to come up. I'd actually found the relatively high points in town and where to go and how to get to those spots should the water come up. Interestingly, the hotel where I was staying was at almost the highest point in the entire either town or county. I can't remember. I work with a geographer on this when I'm picking locations. So I had kind of my escape route and my safe spot worked out. But yeah, it's a constant concern.
So what did it feel like to be in your car? And as you and I talked about, postseason, it's possible based on some of the data points that are coming out of this that they'll actually upgrade Sally. If they don't upgrade it to a 3, it was definitely a strong 2. What was it like to be in your car with your emergency brake on?
Oh boy, I've been in so many hurricanes and it never gets old for me. It never feels like, oh, been there, done that. There's something, hurricanes are like religion to me. And when I'm in the core of a really intense one and the wind is just ripping like that, and the sound of it, it's just like this crazy howly sound. It's mesmerizing to me. And of course I was nervous, but this side of me, literally, it's hypnotizing to me. There's something like almost kind of magical about it, yeah, it just literally, it's hypnotic to me. But I was worried, there was stuff flying down the street, and this was a serious eye wall. This was the kind where like the wind can do serious and did do serious damage.
So, if you think about it, where you were actually, you ended up near a high-rise condominium. There was actually light around you for a nighttime storm. That's very unusual. Talk about that.
Oh, yeah. So as a chaser, one of the things I want to do besides collecting meteorological data is I want to capture it obviously on video. And it's my biggest thrill is to capture the experience on video and then bring that to people who have never been in a hurricane, especially like when my friends in California who've just never been in any kind of weather, basically, when they see my videos, they're like, whoa, man, that looks crazy. Like, I didn't know that's what a hurricane was. So nighttime landfalls always feel kind of tragic because you feel like you're just not going to be able to capture it. This one, for whatever reason, I don't know if it's because Gulf Shores has like a really good power grid or what, but the lights stayed on not the whole time, but most of the time. So I was able to really get a good look at that eye wall and to really capture it. And I got some good shots of it, and it's quite vivid. It was something to be able to capture a nighttime landfall in as much detail as this one.
Well, as Tony Kennan talked about, the tree damage, the power grid damage was greater than Ivan. And the reason why is because for people who have been there before, they know there are pine trees and trees everywhere.
Oh, yeah.
And, the 29 inches of rain softened the ground. And as soon as the eye wall moved in, at some point, that the grid started getting incredibly impacted.
Yeah, and I think that makes sense to me, that the rain just kind of softened the ground and made it worse. And those were, even without the rain, man, there was serious wind in this thing. And I have to say, you alluded to this earlier in the discussion. The Hurricane Center makes a verdict on the intensity in real time, and they've got to move quickly because they're issuing warnings and it's all just happening at once. But after the season ends, they go back, they do a post-analysis, they look at all the data again, they look at more data, and they really do a deeper analysis. And sometimes at the end of the season, they might sort of reassess a hurricane. Actually, they did it with Katrina. They thought it was a Category 4. Actually, because of the winds, they realized, okay, it was really a Category 3, even though the storm surge was obviously crazy with that one. And, who knows, with Sally, it might get an upgrade to a Category 3 based on some of the data. This was a nasty little hurricane.
Wow. Well, here's what I have. Here's my wish. This is not good for you because you're a hurricane chaser. But see, you don't hope for hurricanes.
Correct.
You take the point of view. It is what it is. It's going to do what it's going to do. And you're going to be in the moment if it happens. But you're not sitting here in Bay St. Louis hoping that a hurricane hits somewhere. That's not the way your mind works.
I'm glad you clarified that because it's important. I am not sitting here hoping for it to happen. What I hope for is that if it's going to happen, that I'm going to get right in the right spot to collect scientifically valuable data and capture the experience and document it.
And by doing that, we have less than a minute left, but by doing that, you save lives. And you inform people like me who can inform the public to say, boy, don't take any one storm for granted. Listen to what the Hurricane Center says. I don't try to interpret them. I don't try to guess. Once they bring the information to us, we start communicating it as simply as we know how back to people. And incidentally, some of the global models are starting to pick up on something in less than 10 days in the Gulf again. So we'll have to follow that as well. Josh, thank you, my friend. We'll talk again. I'm unfortunately, most likely before the end of the season. Have a great day, buddy.
Always a pleasure. Thanks, Ricky.
You bet. And Todd Trenchard from the Baco McCarty Foundation when we come back.
Follow SuperTalk Mississippi Gulf Coast 103.1 on Facebook. Facebook.com/SuperTalk MS Coast 103.1.